Easy. We are going to be out of here a little bit earlier. It'll be lovely. But already here with me, I can say our next speaker is an experienced geochemistry laboratory expert. Graeme has over 25 years of expertise in optimising laboratories across diverse commodities in both on-site and commercial environments. That's in the way. With SGS, Graeme has managed large-scale commercial laboratories, on-site laboratory operations, and provided technical support across Australia for over 17 years, ensuring SGS's commitment to a better, safer, and more interconnected world. And with that introduction, I need not say any more, so I'll hand you straight over to Graeme.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yep.
Put it on. Yes.
Yep.
Flicker. Do you want to wander around?
I will probably wander around slightly. I tend to just wander around.
Yep. Backwards, forwards, and you've got a little laser pointer if you want it. Don't blind anyone.
Yeah, I'll try not to blind anybody with that. Again, thank you for everybody coming today. I will premise it by I probably know where some of the bodies are hidden on your sites because I have been to a number of the different sites for some of your labs. I worked for Nickel West before I worked for SGS, so well and truly understand the reconciliation question. Who's hiding the nickel? Used to be the question every quarter. The tapping floor used to always be the answer, but we all know that that's not necessarily true. So presentation today is on global method standardisation and the role the LIMS play in it. To give you some background on the project, I need to give you the scale we're talking about in SGS. As a laboratory provider, we are enormous. As a business, we're also very large in terms of where we are globally. Because SGS, pretty much testing and verification, anything you can think of, we probably do it somewhere in the world, not necessarily all of it in Australia, but anything you can think of that's tested and verified, we probably do it somewhere. So we're very much focused on the natural resources sector. We've got 98,000 staff. Most importantly, we've got 2,650 offices and laboratories. So when you talk about the scale, it's enormous. For the mineral services side, we've got over 440 labs in 130 countries. So again, the scale of what we're talking about is enormous. We're not talking 2 or 3 labs. It is a very, very large organisation. So when we go, we're going to do something different with our LIMS, there's a fairly large ripple effect across the business, as you can imagine. 139 geochemistry labs, which is obviously where most of that focus is. We've got 156 coal labs. Both the geochemistry and the coal labs have been moving across onto our new LIMS system. Again, a lot of other labs, smaller size facilities. Some of them fall in the scope, some don't, mainly because some of them are hard to standardise. Metallurgy facilities in particular can be quite difficult to standardise when it's all pilot test work. And 40, as you can see by the map, pretty much everywhere around the world. In some particularly nice locations and some not. We don't tend to put mine sites quite often in very nice locations. But again, the footprint is what we're talking about here. When we're going, okay, we're going to change the LIMS system. So again, the project objectives. We've always run LIMS systems. We've run C-Class for 20 plus years and obviously had a very long-term relationship with Datamine. System we were running was obviously getting older in technology. More to the point, we also wanted to go to a single cloud-based system. The current C-Class we have on all our operations, most of the operations it's either sitting on a server on site, which obviously means trying to access that information and data, and even control the system is very difficult remotely, and there is no consistency. So we wanted to go to a single LIMS system. So obviously the project objective was to review and optimise and standardise the existing methods and processes. Can't go to a single LIMS system unless you have standardised methods. So part of that was implementing the standard LIMS. And as I said, replace the existing SLIM client server solution with the G6 LIMS, which is a web-based cloud solution. How do you sell it? We have to sell a business case. Right? We're all in the same boat, right? We've got to make money. everybody does, there needs to be a business case. Business case in this instance, it's improved efficiency and collaboration, right? As I said, and then we've got a single source of data. As we were talking about before, the single source of truth. We didn't have a single source of truth. We had about 1,000. Again, it gets back to that single source of data for reference and analytics. Global management reports and KPIs for managers. Again, I hear the same story through the presentations today. Yep, took 5 days to actually get the report to management. And even then, everybody scratched their heads and went, I don't really know if that's true. Because it was just cobbled together. It wasn't pulled out of the data. Improve visibility, improve workflow status. So we know exactly what's happening in all the labs. We can also assist the labs quicker. We can actually intervene where we see if there's any backlogs. We can try and provide them assistance. We can divert work, things like that. And again, and avoid duplication of resources and expertise. Everybody was doing their own thing. How many more people, how much more resources do you think that takes? A huge amount. And a lot of that duplication, as you say, it's expertise, which, let's face it, that's the struggle for everybody, is trying to make sure we've got enough of those qualified staff and then getting them to do meaningful things. Cost savings, avoidance, again, same thing. It all flows from above. The leverage of the infrastructure, support and operations from G6. And the simplify the subcontracting process, because everybody was on a different LIMS system. Hey, we've got all this overflow work. We want to send it from one lab to another. Okay, we're now going to book all the work in the second lab. We're going to send it from the first lab. Then we're going to get the data. We're going to send it back to the first lab. We're going to put it back in the system. Horrible, horrible process. As I said, the project does not require capital expenses. That always makes everybody happy. The fact that there's no actual capital for the infrastructure. As I said, the challenge. Globally, we had 936 schemes across the geochem labs. So that's just the analysis ones. Doesn't even include the prep stuff. 175 digest schemes alone. So 175 different digests we did across the labs. Then you can multiply it by potentially 3 different instrument finishes. So we might have the same digest, then the solution gets run on an AA or an ICP-OES or ICP-MS. So you can see how these numbers are just multiplying exponentially. And most importantly, that was just the ones that were reported when we started the standardisation project to gather the information as to who's doing what methods. You can guarantee there was more sitting in the background that nobody wanted to tell us about. So I said, because, and again, we didn't have the visibility because they sat on LIMS systems on site servers, standalone. Again, the challenge, reviewing the same scheme code from multiple labs, regions, identified you could ask for a scheme code from our Canada lab. You could ask for the same scheme code from the lab in Australia. You would get 2 different types of analyses. Yes, they might both have been a 4-acid or might both have been a sodium peroxide fusion, but they were actually different methods. One would have been using a slightly different method, slightly different weight, volume, might have been using a different temperature, all sorts of differences in the methodologies. Yet they were called the same thing because there was no real control over global methods. Everybody had their own thing, quite often for valid reasons. Again, so the really big issue for us is our clients didn't always get the same analysis at the different sites, even if you requested the same thing. Also meant if we wanted to load share between labs, you can't do it if they're not doing exactly the same methods. And when I say exactly the same, I mean exactly the same. It can't be, oh yeah, we just do a slight variation. No, they need to be the same. There had been attempts made previously on global methods. You can just imagine the resistance to change. We've always done it this way and it's never been a problem. Why should we change? The roadblocks to the change. Getting agreement to standardised methods. As I said, you can put a bunch of people in the room and they will all have a different opinion on what is the right one. There is not necessarily a right answer on that either, but you need to come to an agreement. Clients have databases of results and we don't want data shifts. None of you want to see a data shift, right? We're not going to suddenly start using a different method and call it the same thing because you will see a data shift. So it's important to make sure of that. Clients will have to reconfigure databases with different scheme codes. You know what? Complete and utter furphy. People would throw that out as a reason. No, we can get the system to still give it the same code at the back end if it's really that much of a problem for the client to change their database. And most of the time, you talk to the client, it wasn't a problem anyway. But it was a roadblock that kept getting thrown out. Additional work for local entity to validate a new method. So in other words, hey, we want you to do this method now. You need to validate it. Again, lack of original validation for the methods, which can be 10 plus years old. A lot of the methods were very old. And how do you then control those global methods to make sure everybody is using them, everybody's using the same thing, and they're not doing something else? Part of our key strategies for that control is going to the new global web-based LIMS, G6. So basically now, instead of having everybody having their own little server on site, their own version, there is now a global G6 web-based LIMS, which everybody is on. Yes, they have their own entity, but it's all on the same system. And it is all controlled centrally. Initial engagement of key staff from regions globally to consolidate the list of existing methods. They gathered everybody in Johannesburg, from memory, and they had a whole week where they sat down to try and set down the ground rules to start. This comes back to what Polly was talking about with people. A lot of this is people. It's change management. And that is the biggest challenge, is how do you then get that change? So we said agreement on the process to standardise the methods. How are we even going to do it in the first place? What do? Throw all the methods in a pot and go, well, which ones are we going to use? Of course, everybody's going to defend their own one and not want to change. Cross-regional technical teams formed to review and approve the methods globally as a group. In other words, the days of having a single person who went, yep, that's the global method, they went out the window. There was technical groups formed who would then review them and approve them. Formalised global method validation process. Hey, if you've got to claim, if you're going to go, this is a new method I want, I can reach these detection limits, I can reach this sort of precision, so my limiting repeatability, great, provide me the method validation data. Again, if you ask people to do it, they will all give you something different. So we had to come up with a standardised format of doing that. The real key to the control, only approved methods loaded to the new LIMS and centrally controlled at the admin level. In other words, they can't put their own methods in, they can't change their detection limits, they can't basically change the methods that are in there. Whereas previously on the standalone sites, you could change your methods. You could add a new method. You could do whatever you liked in terms of in the system. Client-specific methods are allowed where required. Particularly mine site operations. There is a lot of mine site operations, because as well as obviously having large commercial hub labs, which is really where we want that consistency, because it really shouldn't matter which one of those hubs you send in. We do run a lot of mine site labs as well. Now, some of those, we take our existing method and we make tweaks to make it actually slightly better for that exact mine site and that exact material, particularly processing plant type stuff, where you become something a bit more bespoke. But it's still going to be controlled the same as the global methods. It's now on the global list. We know exactly which sites are doing what method codes, and we have copies of them. So there is a lot more control in it. This is the method validation template. All right. It's actually getting cut down at the moment, or more to the point, not cut down, but there's a whole heap of stuff hidden. You can see the level of detail that goes into it, because, again, to have a globally standardised method, we have to be able to validate it. That doesn't just mean we validate it once. We validate the original method. Now, if a new lab comes and says, hey, I want to start doing that method, can you load it into G6 for me? Yes, we can. However, please run your validation first. Just because we can achieve those detection limits and precision in one lab does not mean we can in another, because we don't have standardised equipment. We don't every 5 years replace every single ICP-MS around the world with a brand new one of one vendor. You just couldn't do it. It's not possible. So you have to validate it and show that you can. So basically, we run through the validation template itself. And then, okay, so everybody's agreed we're going to change onto a new system. With such an enormous network of labs, how do you eat an elephant? is the old saying. The standard answer, one bite at a time. How do you eat? How do you take a bite out of an elephant without getting stomped on, right? It's not, even that's not possible in this instance. But the point was, we've got such a big network, we've got all these resources, we actually didn't need to eat the elephant. We needed to engage it and use it. We've actually got this huge elephant that we can actually make work for us if we do it collectively. Again, coming back to what you were saying, Polly, around people, this is about people engagement in a large part. We can put systems in place, but how do you implement it and how do you engage those people? Collective face-to-face meeting was had of the management and, most important, key quality and technical staff from the regions. It wasn't just the business managers, it was the key quality and technical staff, which was really important. Single global LIMS system, which is cloud-based, was going to drive the change. Again, to make this effective, simple set of rules were put in place. Yep, all the methods being loaded to the new LIMS system have to be approved by the group. They must be in the globally standardised method document format. This is all about standardisation. All new methods have to include the validation to demonstrate that the labs can hit those reporting limits and repeatability. And if they want a new one, it goes to the group. We have a look at it. We ask them for their validation. And there is instances where we look at it and we go, no, you don't need one. We've already got one. And they're like, oh, but ours is slightly different. We use 25 mils instead of 20 mils. Okay, go and do your validation on the 20 mils. Sorry. Otherwise, we'll end up with a million things again if we're not careful. Oh, I think I've just lost it. Here we go. I said, identified a couple of our large commercial labs for the rollout. Yes, the guinea pigs. Our guys in Townsville, I believe, had Datamine guys sitting in the lab with them for the first 6 months. Hey, I've got results ready to report. Shit, better go write some script to get it out. Like, it was at that sort of level of development. But more importantly, they were in the lab with the staff on the floor making this thing work. As I said, we looked at the big commercial labs. We could have picked a really small lab with a small scope, but you know what? Problem with that is you wouldn't have developed half the stuff, found most of the issues, because the scope would be so narrow. So we picked one of the large commercial ones. Global support team was put in place for the LIMS from a database perspective. So that's an SGS one, not just a Datamine. We have to have our own internal support network as well. A really important key. Said all 4 of the commercial labs in Australia have now switched across to the new LIMS and the standardised global methods. And the majority of the large global commercial labs have also now switched across. So it's been effective. Our big commercial labs have now switched across. Again. Key learnings and benefits realised. Again, can't emphasise this enough. That engagement, empowerment of the teams collaborating globally on the method standardisation was key and has made a huge difference to how we act as a business globally. I have a call every week with basically my counterparts from the quality team in the other countries around the world. We have a call every Thursday night, and honestly, it's probably an hour call, of which there'll be at least 15 minutes is just everybody catching up on what's happening. But it's become a real key plank for the rest of the business in that we're now talking to each other. People come to us and go, oh, well, we heard that this is happening, or they'll go, oh, we heard this is happening somewhere else. And we're like, yep, already know, this is where it is, this is what's happening, because we're now engaged with each other at a global level. By going to a global LIMS system, we're now actually leveraging the network and acting and communicating globally rather than just single little entities. Said, having local LIMS staff with high-level skills to support, train and develop, so important for the success. To have the right staff and resources attributed to it on the scale we're talking about. So globally supported, but has to be locally driven. We saw entities where they tried to do it without any local support staff, really driving it, really difficult because you didn't get that engagement. You needed those key people and those drivers locally. Business has seen significant benefit because every lab is not doing their own development of methods. So again now, rather than, oh, I need to develop this method, hey, hang on, let's see what we've already got. It's now on the global network. Not only that, even if we don't have it, you reach out to the network, somebody will probably have something existing previously, might not yet be in the global format, but they'll go, yep, this is something we've done in the past. Hey, we need to put this in the global format. That's actually been a huge development for the business in terms of actually saving time and resources and not reinventing the wheel. I think is, again, key. Clients now receive the same analysis if they requested the same methods from our lab network. I mean, that's critical. We can do direct comparison work between the labs, right? So if one lab goes, I'm having real problems with this reference material on this method. Hey, let me go and ask one of the other labs who's doing exactly the same thing. Oh, look, they see the same trend. All right, let's go have a look. Oh, look, there's 4 labs that are seeing exactly the same trend. Okay, we better go back and look at this reference material because maybe there's something wrong. Maybe there is a bias out of that method on that reference material because of the matrix, or maybe there was something wrong with the certification. Those things can all happen. But more importantly, we can now do direct comparisons. Analytics can be pulled from the overall system on methods, lab performance, pricing, and reference materials. You can imagine how much information we can now pull out of a single system. Even from the point of view of, as I said, the pricing. What is the average price we charge for a fire assay in Australia versus North America versus Africa? All these sorts of things. You can imagine management is really, really keen on this information, which they never had. They'd ask for it, and they'd get all these different spreadsheets with people giving them different numbers. No information behind it, just numbers that were plugged into a spreadsheet. And again, everybody would go, oh, it took me a month to get the numbers from them. Not sure I really believe it. Whereas this means it's pulling directly from it. We can subcontract between labs without duplication and double handling and improved reporting of it. As I said, business is now acting and leveraging the large global network. That's a real key for us. We're a big global organisation that still a lot of the time was not acting globally because our systems weren't set up for it. And that's a real key. The next thing is obviously the future direction. We run mine site labs, as well as having the big commercial labs. We haven't put G6 on any of the mine site labs yet. The question on that one is, right now the limitation, the way we've got it, is that it's cloud-based. Now, if we lose the internet, it doesn't buffer up and send back up when it comes back on. We obviously can't go at 8:30 this morning, my internet went down. Sorry, Mr. Processing Manager, I can't give you your results for your 9 o'clock meeting because the internet's down. So at the moment, we haven't put them across, but we are actually looking at improvements in terms of the actual IT connectivity. In Australia, we've put Starlink on all of the remote sites where we're operating on client sites. And we're now trialing to see what kind of connectivity we're getting. Are we getting enough uptime? We're certainly getting enough speed, but the question is, do we see any downtime? Because clearly on a mine site operation, we can't have our LIMS system go down and not be able to report results for that period of time. As I said, we are working down that path and it's actually looking quite positive so far. Organisation level reference materials. So in other words, we can go, hey, everybody is going to have the same set of reference materials. Now, clearly we're not going to run that in every single job because if we did that, you'd run out of them within about a month. So what we're talking about is almost a library set going, okay, you can use your local reference materials, whichever supplier that's from, that's fine. But you need to have these half a dozen really key ones. These are your reference ones. So when you want a validation, please run these. So we're looking at those organisation level reference materials. Dashboard reporting with Power BI. Everybody loves Power BI, right? It's the same thing. It's being able to now pull information out of this to be able to run Power BI. We're already doing it. We're just seeing how much further we can extend it. We're doing it from the point of view on lab basis. We're now looking at it on the global basis as to how we're going to run those Power BIs. Centralised and automated data review and analysis. This is the next step. Now, if we're able to review that data, we can review that anywhere. We can review that consistently. We could have one group sitting somewhere just looking at all the data. So a centralised point, just looking at the data instead of every single spot doing that themselves. So we're already well down that path of actually having a team. Again, resistance was always, no, they need to be in the lab. Then COVID came. They proved for us you don't have to be in the lab to do it. And So we've got projects running where we're actually looking at not so much the automated data review, but centralised. So we have a big group that sits together and does all the data review, rather than having all these different people doing it as part of the rest of their job. And guess what? They're doing data review. Currently, they do data review. They're looking at lots of data. Are they actually going back to the instrument and actually fixing the problems? No, they're just trying to get jobs out. They're looking at the data rather than actually spending time trying to fix the root cause. So we get other people doing that. The instrument people, the really smart scientists, can get back on the floor actually doing what you want them to do, not just doing data processing, let's face it. And the next step obviously is the automation side. I'm sure years to come, again, everybody in the room is looking at AI to some degree, I'm sure. We're no different. Is it going to happen in the short term? No, I don't think it is. But is it going to happen in 5 years' time? Yeah, maybe. Again, because of the complexities that are involved. But you couldn't even start looking at it if you didn't have it centralised in one system. If you're trying to do it all remotely, no, as in each entity by itself. So again, the real clear message is the system itself is now driving our standardisation across the business. We wanted to get that standardisation of the methods and how everybody's doing everything. Really difficult when you don't have a single system that spreads across all the labs. We now do. It's working in those large commercial labs, and as I said, the next step is looking at some of the smaller ones to see, can we implement it there. We're still running C-Class in those. It's just the traditional C-Class Slim 2.4. Works really nicely, but again, somebody on one of those sites goes, hey, I have a problem. You've now got to access that site to go and actually help them, rather than being able to just jump straight on the cloud. Oh, yep, there it is. Let me have a look. Talk me through it. No, now we've got to go through the firewall. I've got to go via TeamViewer, and we all know what it's like, unfortunately. One of our challenges is obviously the security side when we're operating on client sites. If we're sitting on the client network, it makes things so much more difficult than if we're able to actually go directly in through something like satellite. So I suppose the biggest message is the system has helped us do it, but like Polly said, it's the people that drive it. We could have put a system in, but if we hadn't engaged the people, would have fallen over completely. So, has anybody got any questions?